said it.
So he's not gonna be here, and I have heard that Senator Mulchin wasn't gonna be here either, so we have a small select group. First item is to approve the minutes. We had pretty extensive minutes courtesy of,
So I read through the minutes and now I move to approve them.
you have an amendment to the minutes?
No, do you?
No.
No, I said I read through them.
Oh, I said, yeah, I read through them too. Any corrections, additions to the minutes? If not, do we have a motion to accept them?
I'll move.
Second.
We have a mover and a second, so the minutes are accepted. Okay. Jesus. I will call Ms. Baker-Merce. We have some questions that you were given, I believe.
I can answer those questions. The first question that you had from the
Would
committee.
you turn on the mic?
Okay, all right, thanks. First question that you asked us to bring the information for to the committee is how many children are currently participating in the EFA? We're still doing our year-end reconciliation, but right now, as of today, it's 4,875 children.
4,865.
75.
75.
Yeah. And then you asked me another question, which I would like a clarification on. You sent the question, does the program remain solvent? And so I just wanted to take a minute to discuss the funding mechanism, and maybe you could clarify what information you're looking for on that question. Because currently the Education Trust Fund is funded by the general fund. The general fund is funded by our state taxes, in large part business taxes, real estate transfer tax, those types of taxes. Then they fund the Education Trust Fund. And then the Education Freedom accounts come out of the Education Trust Fund. So, and currently the Education Trust Fund has about a $2 million surplus in it, if I'm not mistaken, maybe it's $212 million. But so long as the Education Trust Fund and, correspondingly the state of New Hampshire stays solvent, then the Education Freedom account is solvent because that's where the funding comes from. And so was it a different question or did I answer the question?
No, I think that's, what I hear all the time is that the EFA account takes money away that should go to public schools. And I want to be sure that the public school funding is not suffering because of the EFA. That's a little overrated.
Well, currently the Education Trust Fund has a $212 million surplus. And the way the Education Trust Fund is funding is by counting all the children in the state. I mean, I'm sitting here with Representative Ladd, who probably even understands this better than I do, so, I mean, he might be able to chime in, but my understanding is the state, the Department of Ed counts all the children in the state and then moves the money into the Education Trust Fund based on the number of children. The children in the Education Freedom account are clearly children in New Hampshire. And so the state is sending their education funding to an Education Freedom account instead of to a building that they might be enrolled in. And so I don't see how that causes really any difference whatsoever. In addition, in the current Education Freedom Account law and the bill that the legislature is discussing right now with that income limit increase, there is a payment to the public schools if a child leaves. And whether or not you agree that that's a good policy idea, it's happening today. So if a child decides to use their Education Freedom Account instead of go to their public school, the public school is still getting that payment as if they were there for the first year, and then half of it the second year, and then a quarter of it the third year. So whether or not you think that's good policy is a different discussion, but mechanically, that's what's happening now. I don't know the impact of those payments on the Education Trust Fund and whether or not that would cause an impact on the total surplus. I mean, knowing that the surplus is 200 million plus, I think it's probably no impact, especially considering the number of students in the program is such a small percentage of students overall. Where we have 160-something thousand kids in New Hampshire, and the number of kids in the Education account is, 4,000, as we discussed, 825, it's, less than 3% of the kids. So I mean, you're talking about minuscule percentages. I don't like to make what I do seem small, but it's frankly pretty small, so.
Do you have a question? Any questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I have just a brief question. Looking forward, trying to project this forward, let's say 5 or 10 years from now.
Yeah.
What does the funding then look like? I mean, will there ultimately be more of an impact? Because if you're saying it takes a few years for that state portion of the funding for public schools to get to zero, and more students enroll in the EFA program, doesn't it then naturally or logically follow that they will be losing local public schools will be losing more state funding, and then the cost maybe should burden to local taxpayers?
I don't think so, because every time a kid is using the education freedom account, they're free to the town now. I mean, they're not a child that's a burden to the town taxpayer. And so in essence, it's alleviating that cost of the child entirely in the long run, because, your variable costs and fixed costs are all variable in the long run, right? So if you have a child who's in the town and they never participate in the, public school there, they're not a cost to the local taxpayer. Remember, these children are only being educated now with that state money. And so it really is a cost savings. In addition, remember, if they were in their local district, the average cost is $20,000 for a kid in New Hampshire. And the cost of the kid in the education freedom account is about $5,000. So I mean, they're getting educated for a lot less than only with the state money. The education trust fund, and again, I think Representative Ladd is probably better able to answer the education trust fund question than I can. But the money that goes into the education trust fund flows there with a legislative mechanism. I remember there was a discussion in House Finance where they were trying to change that and not make all this extra money flow into the education trust fund. So perhaps if the legislature did that in the long run, then we might be able to have this discussion. But so long as the education trust fund stays with the same formula that it has now, which is creating this multi-hundreds of $million surplus, I don't know that we could describe the kids as a cost at all, because they're otherwise, they otherwise could be enrolled in a public school at 20 grand, and they're using just the state money at 5. And so, I mean, there's $15,000 of savings there, wherever it might be realized from simply just a cost per pupil standpoint. And so, most of the analysis that I see paints it as a cost savings, because 20,000 minus 5,000, you're left with $15,000 not expended. So that's the way that I see it. Thanks for the question. You had one other question, and I brought all of the poverty rate charts because you asked a question about poverty rates, and so would you like that?
Sure.
Okay. That way you have it's 4 of you. So your question was, are there parents who make above the poverty rate? And so I just brought this chart so you can put this into context, because the federal poverty rate is the column that's 100%. And so it's in the top left corner where it says 100%. So that's 100%. That's the federal poverty guideline. Okay, so the federal poverty guideline is the one that says 100%. The way that the legislature has defined the families being able to participate in the education freedom account is percentage above that poverty rate. Okay, and so the chart that says 350%, that's the income limit for the education freedom account. And what that 350 means is 350% above the poverty rate, okay? And so I highlighted, I didn't have my color printer running, but I had highlighted the 300 also, so you can see where the tax credit scholarships are. And then the top right corner is the free reduced lunch income levels. And so we know that 44% of the kids are in that bracket of free reduced lunch income levels. And the parents I hear from most frequently are the ones who don't make these income levels. So remember, when you go up to the door of a public school to sign up, they don't say, are you 350% of poverty line or below, right? This is the child's state education funding, their adequate education grant for all intents and purposes. And you don't walk up to the door of a public school and they say, sorry, you can't come here, you're a wealthy person, right? And so, in my mind, this program should be for every child in the state. And this discussion about income limits, in my opinion, is just, I don't know, I understand why the Senate did that, to create a pilot program to be able to make sure that it worked. But, I mean, based on the Claremont decision, the state should provide the opportunity for an adequate education to every child in the state. And I see this as a mechanism for doing that, for meeting our constitutional obligation. And so I'm happy to have the discussion about the income limits with you, but in my mind, it's not really, it's not logical for this particular pot of money. If a child goes to the public school, it goes there. If the child goes to a charter school, it goes there. When it goes to the public school, the charter school, we're not litmus testing it by income. When it goes into the education freedom account is the only time we're saying, is your income X? Which I think is why the legislators made that compromise of saying that you don't get kicked out if you don't have to redo your income litmus test every year. And I can see Senator Altshore's face, she doesn't like this at all, but, you know. I know you disagree on principle, you know, but
No,
anyway.
I'm afraid to not characterize my expressions. May I ask a question?
Hang on a second. Brian Marcus, would you be kind enough to close that door? We opened it because it was freezing cold here earlier this morning. Hope there's some warm air from the hall will come in here.
Free charge.
Thank you very much. Senator Altshuler, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you for taking my question. And again, I'm afraid to not characterize and perhaps I don't wear my expressions so clarifyingly. But I'm struck by your comments about when a parent brings their student to a public school,
Yeah.
the public school doesn't ask for income verification.
Right, you don't have to be a certain income to attend, you just go or don't go, you know, yeah.
So a student isn't required to meet an income verification. Public schools take everybody within that district, and within a particular town or a particular district, and some students who are brought into the district for other reasons. And isn't it true though that when students go to an EFA program or to a school that accepts the vouchers to attend that school as a portion of tuition, those schools actually have the ability to not accept every student who approaches them. They can very much tailor their student body based on their own requirements. So it's not really a fair comparison because public schools take everybody and private schools only take certain students.
I think you might be thinking of St. Paul's or Phillips Exeter type
No,
private schools.
I'm actually, my
I'm
thought
not
is,
talking about the funding mechanism, right, we're talking about the money following the child and money from the education trust fund.
the money can't follow the child if the child isn't accepted into a particular school. So when there is a school that discriminates against LGBTQ families, that child doesn't have the option to go to that school. And we have schools who do exactly that, discriminate against families and discriminate against teachers. When a parent wants to send a child to a particular religious school, but they may not be a member of that religious community, that religious school absolutely can pick and choose their students, and they oftentimes do, specifically excluding students who are not part of that faith community, and also excluding students who come to them with exceptional needs, whether that be educational needs or physical needs. And there are many, many schools who just flat out don't take those students. So, you know, there's not actually there's not a choice if your choices are limited by the schools that will take you, whereas your public elementary school takes everybody.
So in my experience in this program, I'm sorry, was there a question for me to answer? What I'll tell you is the LGBTQ community is the most bullied children in our entire state and in public schools. And those are families that are coming to us looking for another safer option. When you come into the Education Freedom Account program, you're not choosing necessarily a school building at all. You're coming to us to be able to receive that grant to then be able to make a choice where your child goes. So equating the Education Freedom Account program and someone entering the program to equal someone not being able to go to a particular school doesn't make any sense. The families that come to the Education Freedom Account program enter the Education Freedom Account program, not a particular school with any particular type of litmus test. It seems like families in disenfranchised groups are the largest portion of people coming to us trying to find options for their kids because of their experiences. Again, they might be the kids in the LGBTQ community who, for example, go to a Catholic school here in Concord and are very successful, and they're safe there from bullying. And so I think unilaterally describing groups and saying that they might be disenfranchised in a building, the Education Freedom Account is not a building that they come to. They're coming and getting the grant to then direct it to the school that meets their needs. It's providing a solution for families that are disenfranchised in those, and children who are vulnerable in those groups where they otherwise might be trapped in a building that's not serving their needs. And so to use a private school admissions like Phillips Exeter as a reason that a family shouldn't be able to participate in the Education Freedom Account doesn't really make sense, because they can choose from 120 different schools in New Hampshire when they come to the Education Freedom Account. If one isn't a good fit for them, they can go to another, but it might be the family's environment that makes them choose a different school. They may be in a school that then they don't like, and then they get to go somewhere else. I mean, the whole point of it is that it's a mobile grant that the family directs. And in particular, children that have had difficult experiences or otherwise face discrimination can come to this program. Like, for example, we've been hearing from children who are kicked out of public school, children who are discipline problems, that the school says we can't meet their needs, you're kicked out. And then the Education Freedom Account might be their only mechanism for getting any type of education. So I just feel like you're mischaracterizing the program, because it's not a program that is buildings. It's a program where the grant is mobile for the family to direct to a thing that works for them. If something doesn't work for them, saying that they shouldn't participate because one option might not work for them it's not logical. And Senator Ward, that was all the questions you had today.
Is that-
May I have a follow-up?
What?
May I have a follow-up?
Yes, you may have a follow-up.
Thank you very much. So, getting back to the question of students whose families would like to participate in a brick and mortar school experience, and we have, from some of the reporting, a number of parochial schools who are on the list of accepted programs for students to participate in. Does the scholarship fund track or keep some information for parents who are looking to move their students into a brick and mortar school? Which schools, and let's just use the example that you brought, that, you know, an LGBTQ student, which of those parochial schools, because the preponderance of schools that are enlisted are parochial schools, are open and affirming to LGBTQ students and their families? Do we know? Can you direct those parents, like, you know what, if this is the kind of experience you want to have in a faith-based community, this might be where you want to go, versus, you know what, this other school is not it.
What we would tell the families to do is to visit the schools and ask them the questions themselves, and we would teach the family how to ask the questions that serve them. So, for example, if you come to us with a child who is, 3 grades advanced, and you know you need to be able to access high school level courses for your middle schooler, those are the questions you want to ask when you visit a school building to see if they can meet your needs. And so we would coach a parent on asking the right questions for their family in every circumstance.
So if a student, my question was when, your example of,
children being to the LGBTQ, it's not something anyone asks on their application.
If you don't mind, Mr. Morris, thank you. The question was about an LGBTQ student who, under your example, was bullied in school, and it became an untenable place for learning. And so their parents want to move them somewhere else and use that education voucher money to enroll in a new school. So is there a list? Do you keep some records of these schools are very friendly to LGBTQ students and families, and these schools are not? Or is that,
we would tell the family to go and ask their particular questions of the school leader based on their child's needs.
So if a school has a discriminatory policy against LGBTQ students or families, that is not something that is a front-end piece of information that is given to families before they begin their search for a new school.
The schools are not asking if you're an LGBTQ child in their application process. I have not found any school in New Hampshire that uses that as a litmus test for entry into the school. It's not something anyone, have you ever seen that application say, are you an LGBTQ? It doesn't make sense.
No, I would.
How would they know that, is what I'm asking you. How would the school ever know that if your child is enrolled there? Honestly, I'm really asking the question. It's not something they ask on the application process.
I think we're getting beyond what.
Fair, yes, fair enough. I'm just saying, that's not something anyone is asking people in the application process to a building.
I think we are discussing a subject that is not on our list of things to discuss. I do agree that I don't think the schools should give out a list, these are friendly schools to this kind of population, this is not a good school for you. I think that's something that the parents need to explore on their own.
Well, that's how you teach parents to go to schools and ask the questions that are particular to their child's needs if they're looking for an alternative. Remember, back to the original discussion, the families that are coming to us in many cases are experiencing this type of discrimination in the public school. And so to say that by going somewhere else, it doesn't make sense. I'm just not following, I guess, the train of thought. Because the family can choose the education option that's right for them, or no option. Remember, you could be a homeschooler in this and put together your education with a tutor and a class and course or online ed. And so to say that they are facing discrimination here doesn't make sense when that's why they've come to us, to escape that.
Thank you. Any other questions here?
Yes, I have a series of questions I've prepared for today.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions, and how long do you expect to take?
Well, since I just got this, late afternoon on Friday, I prepared the questions over the weekend.
Okay,
And however long they take to answer, is how long they take. I have about 10 questions.
okay, see, you remember what the charges of the committee?
I do, in fact, I keep that, handy right here. I keep my legislation.
Implementation of Oversight 194-M, including the impact of state education funding to local district schools, and make recommendations for any legislative changes to the Education Freedom and Savings Account program.
Mhm.
I think we're looking at how successful is it, do we have enough money, is it working for the kids, are they improving after they go to this new school, to this new program? And I think that we're getting into the weeds a little bit about who is doing what and what kinds of questions can the school help with the parents. So I will give you time to ask your questions.
Thank you. Okay, so, do we have a breakdown of a record of the educational attainment of the students who are, and, you know, I'll use the term loosely, graduating out of the program, because there is not, a graduation requirement to come out of this program, because there are so many different options of how you move out. But, you know, if graduation is just attaining a certain age, what's the breakdown of educational attainment? How many of the students take standardized tests? Do they use New Hampshire statewide assessments? How many do portfolios? And is there, now that we're, you know, 3 years in, are we analyzing the trends of that attainment? What are the choices that are being made, and what are the scores that are coming in? So
I
we can
can
really start
bring
there.
that to the next, I can bring that to the next meeting.
Okay, okay, so we'll look forward to that at the next meeting. Other than courses that are, I would categorize them as extracurricular, like driver's ed, right? How many students that are involved in the EFA program also take a class at a local public school? Like, who are doing these dual enrollments? What does that look like?
Okay, I can bring that to the
And
next.
is it, you know, are we seeing one-offs, or is this a trend of, you know, of certain families are always taking
Mhm.
a certain class at a
Great
certain
question.
school?
Yeah, great question.
I have a question for you, Senator Oshel. Who,
Yes.
meaning the kids who are going to an alternate program and also taking a dual program at the community college?
No, my question is for, students who have withdrawn from the K through 12
Right.
program to, take advantage of an EFA voucher. What, of them, which ones also double back and take a class at one of the local public schools?
Okay.
But not a class like driver's ed or after school yoga,
Yeah.
like,
You mean like AP class, AP calculus as an
or rudimentary algebra,
Yeah.
you know?
Would
Or college prep literature class.
Would you also want included in that the children that are attending out-of-district public school full-time with the EFA?
I'm getting to that question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting to that question. So after, in a previous meeting, in the last meeting actually, which the date was on the 15th, you had mentioned that, and I will look through it to find it in minutes, that the Children's Freedom Savings Account staff keeps eyes on the expenditures. And is that, is there a differentiation between the staff that are working under you, enrolling people into the program, or the class wallet, which I know has a program built into it? Are there people in the New Hampshire program making periodic reviews, monthly or quarterly, of what is being spent through the class wallet? And is there any conversation with parents about those class wallet expenditures. And I'm asking because there's a differentiation between taking your voucher money and having it transferred towards paying tuition at a brick and mortar school. Or using that class wallet money to purchase a particular curriculum that there's an intention to follow through at home, and just buying hardware and software, and not knowing, who's using that actually. You're buying, you have a fourth grader and you're buying fourth grade curriculum, it's pretty easy to figure out who it's being used for, even though we don't have specifics. But you buy a Microsoft Surface and, some Dragon Speak software and an extra monitor, like what is that for? Like how do we track that actually get used as an educational expense? And what's the process for verifying those, parent reimbursement expenses? What is the process? Do we have that in, can we get that policy? Can we take a look at that policy? Here's how it works.
Absolutely.
Great.
We have a full agenda for next meeting. Any other questions?
Okay. Yeah. So there's data, there's a policy brief that was done in March of 2024 that included student information on the type of school that EFA students enrolled in. How do you collect that data? So, how is that data released? We had heard in a previous meeting that there was, particularly when the Commissioner of Education was testifying before the Joint Committee, that there was some difficulty in reporting out some specifics because of the unique relationship with the third-party vendor of your organization being a third-party vendor. However, we did get this policy brief in March, and the title of it from the Fiscal Research and Education Center was The Reality of Switchers. And so there's a lot of referencing in there of information that seemed to not be wanted to, that there was reluctance to share in one environment, at the joint fiscal, and now seems to be public. So I want to know what your organization is intending to share and what they're not. Because we got all of this, we've got a whole policy, 11-page policy review, but then we couldn't get some details from the commissioner. So I'm wondering if there's some disconnect there, and I'd like to be able to make sure that we're getting all the information that we can get.
Great, so I do have something else to share that was one of your questions, Senator Ward, in advance that I brought. And we did create a website. So you'll remember this discussion came up at the last meeting. And we did create a website where we aggregated all the reports from all the entities and put them in one place. So I wanted to show you that that does exist on our website now. If you go to financial, you'll see a link that says education, freedom account reporting, and fact sheets, and everything is in one place now. So I think that will help to be able to have all the data posted in one place.
Is that the DOE website?
It's on our website at Children's Scholarship Fund. Yes, we wanted to make it easier for everyone to find everything in one place. So we put everything in one place. Our audit is there, right? The program, risk-based program audit is there now, public. The expense reporting sheets that were posted before and then just disappeared are now there. So everything is there in one place. So I think that will help as a starting point. And then secondarily, when people have asked us for information, we bring it to Senator Altshuler. So to this committee, prior to you participating, we were able to bring that same data that says the students are coming from here and going to there. So that's data that we're happy to bring Again, whatever you request, we'll bring to the committee. And everything is now posted in one central location, so I hope that helps.
Yeah, I do have some of the back information that provided from prior meetings, and
The challenge I think you might be describing is that the kids may go to multiple locations, right, like we talked about. It might be a family that's using 10 or 20 education service providers for their child. And so the question that you may be remembering is, you can't take an education freedom account kid and put them in one school. And so you can't get a report that says child equals school, because they are in most cases using multiple. So you can do like number of providers by child. You could say like, here's the providers and here's the number of children that choose them, but you would get overlaps. You know, for example, if you use a tutor and go to a school and take a course, you're gonna show up as 3 kids. And so that might be what you're describing as a challenge in the data is not necessarily a challenge in getting the data, it's how we're looking at it. Because families are using more than one provider. And so if you say X number of schools, X number of kids, you're gonna have overlap. You're gonna have double kids in multiple places because everyone's going to multiple places.
yeah, just.
So that might be what you're describing. But if you want the data on the expenditures, you can see that, and it's on the website now. So you'll be able to look at that as many times as you like to see the dollars by school and then number of transactions by school, which is the best way that you can see how much is happening at a particular provider, if that's what you're interested in.
So, specifically, what I know, like I asked before, is the students who are using their educational freedom voucher to go to another school or are enrolled in a homeschool curriculum, but then double back and go back to their home school to take a class.
Okay,
Take
gotcha.
2 classes.
Gotcha.
Something we discussed
Yeah.
in the legislature quite a bit this year is what does that look like? And
So are you curious the children who withdraw and return to public school, or are you curious the multiples? The people who are doing a thing in multiple places, like a class in the public school, a class online,
Yeah.
and then a class. So that's what you're the most interested in.
I'm interested in the ones who go back to the public school.
Full-time permanently or for
Who
just
are
certain
outside,
things?
who are disenrolled or never enrolled, because we know that the majority of students who take the vouchers were never in a public school. But there are a not insignificant, from what I would understand, number of students who are using the voucher program for their education, but then subsequently enroll for a class or 2 classes at their public school.
Got it.
For whatever reason. And we're not, and what I'm interested in is those classes that are inside the school day, not the marching band that's affiliated with the music class, not driver's ed. I'm talking about like during the regular school day classes. And do we have data on, since the program began, do we have a year-by-year accounting of how many students have returned to public school after having been voucher students?
Yeah, that's on the website also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As of a certain date. We did it last year. I can't remember when that was. We brought it to this committee.
So 2023?
I think so, yeah.
23.
Yes, because much of the data I remember was families that were redoing their applications but were slow to redo their applications. But that's on the website also.
Okay, so in the last meeting, it was reported that we had about 500 new students expected to enroll in the EFA program for this next school year, 24-25. So how many of those students are currently enrolled in a private school or a homeschool program?
So you're wondering where the students come from? Okay, I can bring that to the next meeting. Sure. For the new applicants. Got it.
And based on the information that when you and I met, you gave me a list of I think it was called the approved vendors list, and of those approved vendors, there were a number of brick and mortar schools that are listed. So those are places where an EFA voucher would supplement the tuition program. Since the inception of the program, I've been keeping an eye on a couple of schools that are on the seacoast specifically, because they're my neighborhood. And I'm wondering if you are keeping track of how many private schools in New Hampshire are using the EFAs as part of their financial aid. And I ask you because I am seeing a trend where there were schools that would say, this is our tuition, and some schools are very open about, we have support from a robust alumni network or from our diocese. This is something I noticed specifically with Catholic schools. That supplemental financial aid for families wishing to put their children in these schools has now changed, and their financial aid rubric begins with, you must go get money from the state, and we fact before we will consider financial aid. And so the state has evolved into a supplemental financial aid voucher for private schools that have factored that into their tuition structure. And that, I don't know that, we can speculate as to what the intention was but that's how it has evolved. Like, that's what it is now. So families who cannot afford to send their children to this program without applying for financial aid, this program is now immediately factoring in, go get money from the state before we give you money from our robust alumni network or from our diocese. So are you taking into account how many of those private schools are saying you have to get your state money before we'll let you apply for our money?
No, I'm not looking at that at all. Because the families, again, remember, control the money in their education freedom account in class 12, as you described. And so whether they pay someone or not is their decision. It's not like the school can't say to them, you have to do X, because the parent controls that pot of money. The parent could get the education freedom account and not pay the school, conceivably, or pay the school with their own money and then get reimbursed after the fact, and the school may or may not even know that the family has an education freedom account. So what you're describing seems like it might be a suggestion.
Oh, no.
So I'm not monitoring that in general, and
I'm
the
tracking it.
families have power over the money and the schools don't. And so, to me, it's maybe the way you're looking at it, so I don't.
Well, you may be surprised to learn when you look at some of the websites of the parochial schools, particularly in my area, that in order to access any financial aid, before you even look at their pool of money, they want you to get money from the state first. So they want to see the maximum amount of of voucher money available go to them, and that is factored in to what financial aid may be available for that student afterwards. No financial aid is being offered anymore until you get your free money from the state. That is built into the websites. That is built into the tuition pages, and they're being very, very open and honest about it. But if you want to apply to these schools, here's your first step. If you're not going to write us the full tuition amount, you would like to apply for any financial aid, you must demonstrate that you went to go get your state money first, and then we'll talk. So I find that to be disconcerting for sure, because I don't know that that is the reason we put this program together to create a financial buffer for parochial schools, but that's what's happening.
So again, the families do control the money, and so the school has no strings attached to it. They couldn't even know what the family has for an amount of education freedom account unless the family told them. In addition, the timing doesn't necessarily work for the way you're describing those strings, because you won't have your first grant in your education freedom account. It's paid on the same schedule as the public school. So it's September, November, January, and April that the family knows that they have the grant and can take it and use it to pay tuition at school. But what you're describing seems like something that would happen well in advance. And so I think they may be making a suggestion that families apply that qualifies so that they can use the money to pay for tuition if they so choose. But I'm just not sure that what you're describing is possible, because you wouldn't know the amount of your education freedom account until September, in which case you might have already started school in August. And so the timing is just a little off. But I mean, I can do a little survey or something and ask if you are interested in that data.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have anecdotal information because I don't have the capacity to do a statewide survey, but in just going to a couple parochial schools in my area, right out of the gate, I'm looking at a Catholic school that starts with financial aid, and the very next thing is the New Hampshire Scholarship Fund. So they are telling their student, they're telling
that
their
makes
families,
sense, right?
go get this money,
That makes sense.
and then
Of
we'll
course
talk.
you would. Of course you would tell someone to come get a scholarship or an education freedom account to help them to be able to afford the thing that you're providing. That makes good sense to me, honestly. It makes sense. I thank you to the schools for referring families to us. I guess is the best way I can put it. Because of course you would have them come. I know also from my experience in this space that many of the schools' financial aid wasn't financial aid at all, like you're describing. It was discounts or losses that they were taking in general. So you would go to a little school and you would be low income, and they would let you come, and they would just basically write off the piece of tuition that you couldn't pay. I mean, the schools don't have grand endowments. I mean, I think you may be thinking again of like Phillips Exeter, where they have endowments to be able to fund financial aid. Most schools are not fundraising financial aid dollars that have any substance whatsoever. I mean, they might raise, $50,000 for financial aid or $100,000, and they're trying to help, 500 kids or something. I mean, it just seems like you may be, I don't know, I guess I appreciate the schools sending the families to us, because this is the child's rightful education funding that, in my opinion, absolutely belongs in their education freedom account for them to direct. And if they want to choose that school and this makes it possible for them, then I'm for that. I mean, that's why I do the work, so that the family can have access to this grant and then be able to use it to pay for the thing that works for them. And so if the school is saying, go see Children's Scholarship Fund, that's helpful to the family to provide that information. I don't see the fact that it could ever be strings, because the families control the money in their, to your point, class wallet account. And I'm looking forward to showing you how that process works at the next meeting. I'll bring all that
Great.
stuff for you.
Just as a point of clarification, because you brought up Phillips Exeter Academy a couple of times, and Phillips Exeter Academy a number of years ago announced a program where students whose families are in the 300% of poverty range, their students go free.
That's awesome.
So that is,
That's awesome.
so that is,
That's awesome.
that's not really a factor, and they do have, they and St. Paul's.
Yeah, I was
some
just
of
thinking
the
of big endowments. That's all.
more robust endowments
Yeah.
are actually not looking to their New Hampshire day students, because that's also a wildly small number of students that attend these schools, because it is, they leave space for day students. but those students who have financial means, are covered. So we're really talking about some of the other private schools and particularly parochial schools, which leads me to one of my last questions. We had a story come from NHPR about a school in Richmond that is from the St. Benedict Center, call themselves the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and they have a school, and it is listed on the Southern Poverty Law website as a hate group, and our New Hampshire Scholarship Fund is used by students at that school. So is there some vetting about what kinds of schools are approved for use of education freedom accounts? Because I find the idea that our tax dollars would be funding a school that is labeled as a hate organization to be incredibly troubling and disappointing. So I'd like to know what kind of vetting happens.
Sure.
And on that same vetting, we have a parochial school in Dover that we have a number of students who use their education vouchers to go to. And this school, while they have not specifically said, we do not want LGBTQ students to come to this school, they did make a very public statement to the community by firing LGBTQ teachers. So there's no better way to demonstrate to a particular community that you're not welcome here than by ousting some very public members of that community. So there may not be a policy, and no, it's probably not on the application, but if you are looking into this school and your family is an LGBTQ family, or your student is out, then that's not the place for you, because they've already demonstrated, like, we hate those people. And so we're gonna make it wildly uncomfortable for them, and we're gonna fire staff. So, no, it doesn't look like it's a policy, but they have done all the things but put it on the application. Is that not something that perhaps the education scholarship group should take into account and give a warning to parents? Like, you know, I know you're coming to us because of this, but that might not be the best fit for you given their history, if you have this knowledge.
I can bring the vetting process to discuss at the next meeting for sure.
Can I ask a question?
Are you finished?
For the moment, thank you, yes.
Representative Levin.
On the level of discussion you just had regarding discrimination, I noticed that in the statute that we have for EFAs, 194F:6, requirements for education service providers, item C that we have in law, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it, they must comply with all state and federal anti-discrimination laws. When we're vetting a provider, do we have them indicate or comply with this particular statement I just read by checking off the box, or?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, given that answer, and thank you, Representative Ladd, for pointing that out, given that answer, would you be looking to withdraw support from, the scholarship fund to the St. Benedict Center Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary School in Richmond, since they very clearly violate this section of the law?
Again, I'm not a civil rights attorney, and so I can't answer that question. I don't know what you're talking about, sorry.
You don't know about this
I don't.
report?
No. No, I don't.
Okay, so it was a report, by NHPR, just last week, so.
I'll look into it. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. So since we have one very, very specific and documented organization that violates its, and I have brought to your attention.
I think you're basing your opinion not on the New Hampshire Human Rights Commission's discussions, but on a newspaper, on the NHPR reporter's opinion?
It's not an opinion piece, it is a news report, it's not an opinion piece. This is a news report, so it's
Okay.
research, and if there's a question, then the reporter could probably answer any further questions, but I have,
So you're saying
No
the
reason
Southern
to-
Poverty Law Center said something, that's what's in the report, in that NHPR?
part of the report,
Says the Southern Poverty Law Center said something about, as we were discussing, just hearsay here? I mean, again, I don't have any knowledge of it, it just sounds like you said that someone else said something about someone else. And so I would think it's a question for the New Hampshire Human Rights Commission to ask them if anyone's filed any complaints, any civil rights complaints, because they're the oversight agency or committee in New Hampshire that handles civil rights. And so that's where I was gonna go, is to ask the people on the New Hampshire Civil Rights Commission if this is is it the only entity we have that oversees this type of discussion? Again, I'm not a civil rights attorney, so, from what you just said, you're saying someone said something about someone.
no, I'm
So
gonna.
to me, that doesn't seem like a complaint around civil rights.
In an email response to a request for comment on the Richmond School's inclusion in the EFA program, the New Hampshire Department of Education said the approval process for non-public schools to operate in New Hampshire is outlined in the state's education rules. The Immaculate Heart of Mary School was approved in 1990 and most recently renewed in 2002 after meeting the requirements as outlined in Ed 400, the department wrote.
Okay.
The Department of Education Commissioner Frank Elwood said the New Hampshire Children's Scholarship Fund did not respond to requests for comment Tuesday and Wednesday. The St. Benedict Center members, who call themselves the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, traced the group's founding to Father Leonard Feeney, a Boston preacher, who was quoted at the Boston Common by the Harvard Crimson in 1951 using anti-Semitic language and a well-worn Jewish conspiracy trope, while also criticizing Protestants. The Southern Poverty Law Center describes the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary as a radical traditionalist Catholic and has placed them in its online hate map. So this is a current placement on the hate map, so I can send you the link, and I will absolutely send you the story. And as early as 2005, the St. Benedict Center described that when the world and the church treated us like a colony of leopards, enemies have attempted to smear Father Feeney's memory and work. So it is very defensive about their anti-Semitic leanings, their radical Christianity, and this is an organization that we have EFA students participating in. So I'm worried that the vetting of the schools that we are sending our money to, because that is New Hampshire education and tax money going to these schools, don't align with our values or our laws as outlined in the Human Rights Commission. So if there's a violation and you are administering this program, should you be the one bringing that forward?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up the conversation here, because I think that Ms. Baker as really applicably said, this needs to be an issue resolved by the Human Rights Commission. Within our statutes here, I read the one off that I read just earlier, 194F:6, comply with all state and federal anti-discrimination laws. Then you go down to the next section of law, 194F:7, where it says, in Roman 5, an education services provider shall not be required to alter its creed. So now we're getting sort of maybe in an area of conflict here, and so the question you're raising, Senator, is one that is a legitimate question. However, in regard to our rules are made based upon our laws, and I'm sure that Attorney Morrill just walked in will comply with that. So, and the intent of these laws, those rules have to follow. So we have an area here where we're saying one thing and another thing, and so where is that boundary in between? We've seen the same thing in higher education when we hear river to the sea, and that type of issue. Some schools are supporting those types of things, and others are not. I think we're getting into a matter of the courts, and something has to be decided at that level. And the Supreme Court has put that in terms of religion, exemptions for religion. But there's also these other areas you're pointing to, and I think that is something that the Human Rights Commission should resolve.
Thank you, exactly. And when there is when can we see these things rise to the surface? And, you know, before we get involved with these kinds of organizations that run afoul of our human rights statutes, somebody has to say, this runs afoul of our laws already. And so, is it going to be you to stop that money from going there? Are you going to reach out to the Human Rights Commission? Is it the Department of Education? Should the Commissioner of Education be bringing this forward? We have to wait for a citizen. So, yes, thank you for bringing that up, Representative Ladd. What the question is now that we know who makes the next step. Who does that?
I'll be happy to bring this up to the Commissioner Hill and ask him.
Okay,
Have you come to the end of your questions?
I'm taking a last review of my document that I prepared.
When you're done, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Should have more coffee today, right?
We got 2 cups.
What?
Did you have questions?
I do have a question.
Okay.
When you finish with your question.
Oh, okay, I thought you were jumping in and I was waiting for you. Thank you.
Just want you to finish, okay?
Okay.
Take care of that.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure, do we have on the website, do we have a process for verifying the parent reimbursement requests? Like, is there a policy that?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring that next time.
Yeah, so that policy, okay.
It's a whole process. There's policy and a process, so you'll get to see the business process aligned with that.
Finally, would you, since there is some significant concerns with, not just this particular school, but schools that run afoul of our Human Rights Commission.
Again, I'm not hearing any concerns from anyone except from you, Senator Altshuler.
How many people do you need to hear from besides somebody on the
I mean, I'm just saying, in general, families are not complaining to us about the
I'm
schools that
complaining.
they're participating in.
I'm complaining, so I'm bringing it to your attention, and I would like to know if you would pause reimbursements to this organization until you get some clarity from the Human Rights Commission as to whether or not this group runs afoul of our human rights laws?
So I'm not at liberty to do that, because the law specifically says that I can't discriminate against a provider. So my hands are tied. And so I think to Senator Ward's,
You approve the providers though.
well, the non-public schools in New Hampshire are approved by the Department of Education. And so they're approved for EFA because they're approved by, so I think Senator Ward asking the commissioner is the right way to go
Alright, so if I understand
on your
your,
concerns.
if I understand correctly, you do not have the authority to pull an organization out of the approved list. That has to come from the Department of Education.
In the case of non-public schools, yes. The non-public schools, private schools in New Hampshire are approved by the DOE to be private schools, and that's what makes them allowable in the Education Freedom Account program. So you're right, in that case, I don't have the authority, unless someone's committing fraud, and then I can kick them out if it's fraudulent.
Okay, so the appropriate pathway is to go directly to the Commissioner of Education.
I think that makes sense, what Senator Ward suggested, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So would you send that article to Erin so that we'll have it? And I will ask about what's going on, and I will ask about whether or not we can hold payment, if that's an option at all.
Senator Ward, I think if we're listening to what's been conveyed to us, if somebody decides, well, you're discriminating, so I'm going to withhold, I could say that, but I'm not the person that's given that task to make the decision whether that organization is discriminating. That would have to be determined. A person's not guilty until they're found guilty by the court, just because we assume they're guilty of something.
And again, it sounds like hearsay in that article. So I couldn't base something that I was doing at Children's Scholarship Fund on something like that, that isn't an actual complaint to the human rights, or from the human rights. It's just, in my opinion, again, I'm not a lawyer, I probably need a lawyer to give me an opinion on this, because I'm not an attorney, but it just feels like the law prohibits me from doing what we're describing.
I imagine you're concerned though, that's a
I
concern.
mean, I'd love to see what you're,
But it's a
what you're talking
concerning
about.
allegation. I imagine that you would be concerned to know that this is an allegation made against one of the schools that the New Hampshire Scholarship Fund is supporting. And,
Again,
I was alarmed and wanted to look into it further, which is why I'm bringing it to you. And I'm hoping that you would also be alarmed, like, wow, that sounds
well, and I don't know
troubling,
anything about the group.
rather than dismissing it.
No, I don't have enough information to make any kind of decision. Again, I'm not an attorney, I would consult one, but I don't know what the Southern Poverty Law Center is either, so I have to look into that
Really?
also. Yes, sorry, I don't,
Okay.
I have heard circumstantially that it exists, but I don't know what they do either, so I don't have enough information to really give you any opinion, and I'm not an attorney. And so I'm definitely not a civil rights attorney or a constitutional attorney, and it feels like this is all in that space there, where you're talking about, I don't know, it sounds like a First Amendment discussion, I have no idea. Again, not enough information to answer any of those questions. I just know I'm prohibited from discriminating against a provider in general. My hands are tied. The private schools are in the program because they're approved already, and so, again, I don't have any opinion on that in general. In addition, remember that we're giving the grant to the families, and the families are choosing. And so I've got to just go back to my original discussion here, where if an education provider wasn't meeting the family's needs, they would take their education freedom account and go somewhere else to a provider that was meeting their needs. And so if a family was at this education provider and felt like they weren't getting their needs met, they could then take their education freedom account. It's a solution to the problem, whether that problem exists or not. Again, I'm not in a position to have enough information to discuss anything. But what I do know is if a family is not getting their needs met by a provider that they're choosing with their education freedom account, the education freedom account is a vehicle to a solution for that, where they can use the education freedom account to pay a provider that is meeting their needs. And so if there was a family at a school that they felt like they were experiencing some sort of discrimination, the education freedom account solves that because it's a vehicle to a different provider that works for them. And so if a family called me from a school and said, I'm not getting what I want, I don't like this school, as a matter of fact, I think they stink, I would say, great, let's choose something else that does work for you, and the education freedom account is a vehicle for that. And so I'm just still kind of looking at it in the opposite way that you're looking at it, I think, Senator Altshuler.
So Senator Archel, how many kids are in this particular school?
Yes.
students, do you
Would
know?
love to know that.
I would.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions, and this is an approved school, so
Do you know how
I
many
do
kids?
not.
Oh, okay,
there are 50 students,
total.
at the school in kindergarten through 12, and, confirmation that some of those students are utilizing the EFA program. And this is a confirmation from the prior of the St. Benedict Center, Brother Andre Marie Villarubia.
Okay, I'll look into it. Can I ask my question now?
Yes, ma'am.
In the section 194-F:5, it talks about Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission. And that commission should consist of 7 members. Do we have that commission?
Yes,
And there are 7 members?
yes.
Okay. Are
Yes.
they appointed or are they elected, and how is this done?
The commission is appointed geographically, and so it has to be people participating from all over the state. So people, in essence, represent their geography on the commission. And there is someone on the commission that wants to roll off and be replaced, and so we are working on that currently.
So
Finding
is
a new person from that geographic area.
there a term limit for the participants?
No, because it's, to me, it looks like an ad hoc
Okay,
group for appeals. It's to be able to adjudicate advanced appeals. If, for example, so this goes to Senator Altshuler, if we throw someone out of the program for fraud, they can appeal. For example, if they say it's a misunderstanding, that was an error, they can appeal to this provider and parent oversight committee who would then adjudicate their appeal. But we haven't had that happen to this
do
point.
they meet on a regular basis, or they only meet if they have a complaint or a question?
They're ad hoc for appeals.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Well, I'd like to follow up on that. We had a discussion on this advisory council, commission, last time we met. And I'm looking at the first section, Roman 1. It says, "They're established a parent and education service provider advisory commission to assist the scholarship organization by providing recommendations about implementing, administering, and improving the EFA program." That's a separate Roman.
Continue, read the next line.
And I read the next line
Great.
down, but I'm
Great.
seeing we're referencing appeals on that
Yeah.
and et cetera.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about Roman 1,
Uh-huh.
that is the responsibility of this commission beyond what we're using as an ad hoc group to advise on these appeals that
Yeah.
you mentioned. And
That's how I was reading it the whole time.
Yeah.
And so if we want to get a legal opinion to read it a different way, we would do that, but the way I've been reading it the whole time is the way I've described it.
Well, I see Roman 1 as separate from Roman 2 and Roman 3. And Roman 1 is the lead off underneath Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission. And so, as all the other commissions which we have, which are vital to how we process and run these programs, like the one I'm on, Public School Infrastructure Commission, they make some definite decisions and recommendations to fiscal in terms of how we're gonna spend our money for access and safety in our schools.
Yeah.
This one right here has the responsibility, I see, as looking at this program as well as this particular body is doing. And it's something I feel that you can use in reviewing and implementing, how you're implementing and administering the program. And it may encompass some of those issues which we've just been discussing today.
Yeah, it's a good idea, actually. I like the way you're thinking about it. Yeah, I hadn't considered it. I also was considering, in general, implementation to be, in my mind, the program was implemented implemented, November 2021. And so I have been thinking about the word implementation as just the startup, but it seems like this committee has interpreted that differently, because your oversight was supposed to be implementation, but yet we're continuing to talk about operations. And so I think it's just however you read the section. Like in my opinion, I thought that this committee would just discuss the implementation, which to me was the first 3 months. And so it's just a different way of reading it.
Well, and taking the other two words says implementing, administering, and improving. So to me, the connotation is it's ongoing.
Yes, well, we have used them for that reason. They've participated in surveys that we've done to find out, we're working on, for example, a new piece of technology. We implemented a provider mapping system based on their feedback. So we have received their feedback, but it's still been in an ad hoc environment. Like we would write them a message saying, can you do this survey to give us the feedback? Not something that we made them come there and sit and in a circle. Does that make sense?
Any other questions?
Yes, thank you. So, we're back to the statute, and.
I don't have it in front of me, just so you guys know. I'm doing all this out of my head, because I came prepared to answer Senator Ward's questions, but again, doing the statute out of my head, just so you know, okay?
We talked about this briefly at the last meeting too, is what is the policies and procedures for establishing whether there has been fraud, and how does someone report fraud?
Yeah.
So we had talked about
That I can
how
answer
the
right now.
committee would be reviewing appeals,
Yeah.
right? So we have to get to the point where there's been a decision to appeal, to bring that committee together.
Yeah.
If we back it up to, there's an allegation that this particular provider or a particular participant is engaging in fraud.
Yeah. Or not providing the service. What the law says is, if they consistently don't provide the service that the family is paying for. So for example, if somebody paid for tutoring and then the tutor didn't show up, okay, and then they paid for tutoring and the tutor didn't show up again, then we can, we have some recourse in that particular, we can say you can't participate in the program and you need to give us the money back. And so that's what the law contemplates in this. And on our website, Senator Altschiller, on the Education Freedom Account page, there's a tab with our policies. And you can read through all of these policies. And then there's a tab for anonymous fraud reporting. And it's on that same side of the website where you can click and you can make an anonymous fraud report. There's a hotline and there's a portal where you can do that. And then you also can read through all the policies there. I mean, there's pages and pages of policies, but I know all of that is in there.
So then I think you may need to do some back-end website work, because if I don't know to go through every drop-down menu of the website, and I put in the search bar with the little magnifying glass to search for a topic, and I put in reporting fraud, fraud suspected, or the word fraud, I come up with a 404 page not found in all of those circumstances. So I use a combination
So
of.
the search box doesn't work. So you go to the Education Freedom Account page, in the apply drop-down box, everything is there on one central page. But it's right at the bottom. And so the policies is halfway down. And then it's on page, I have it memorized, so I'm looking myself. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 of the policy document there. And then the hotline is the bottom link.
I would,
So get the
I would
search
say
box.
that
I think it's because
probably
they're
3 pages
PDFs.
back and
Yeah.
still can't find it. And
Okay.
if I wanted to report, I don't see the hotline that we're supposed to have.
Okay, if you
available.
go to the Education Freedom Account page, in the box of links, it says red at the bottom. And I think that the search tool will only crawl the text on the website. The policies is a PDF document that's linked. And so my guess is that the search tool won't crawl a PDF that's in the website. And so that's probably why the search box is not finding it.
I'll spend a little more time with it and try to figure that out. Do we have any education service providers who have capped over the $100,000 expenditure that they're receiving over $100,000 in,
I'd have to look at the expense report on the website and reread it. I haven't memorized.
okay.
Sorry.
Because now that we're 3 years into the program and you previously said that we're expecting 500.
Can you explain what you mean by cap of 100? I don't know what you mean by cap of 100,000. That's a new idea to me.
Well, it's in statute that the program requires a surety bond for any education service provider who receives more than $100,000 in EFA funds.
Okay, I think it says may. I think that section says may and not shall, but I'll have to research it. I'm not sure.
No, it's a shall. So, the scholarship organization shall adopt policies and procedures that are necessary for the administration of this chapter. And I will give it to you, this may include policies of requiring a surety bond for service providers receiving more than $100,000 in EFA funds. And I'm curious if you're doing that, if the surety bond is being recommended to be shared with the DRA, or what banks we're using to cover that.
I'm not doing that at this time.
Right. Well, since the program has grown so exponentially, and from what I understand, there's an expectation of 500 more students enrolling in the program for 24-25, it would stand to reason that some of these service providers are now, reaching a critical mass of students that are bringing that EFA money into their organization, and so we're probably getting close to that number. And we need to, make sure that those are bonded, because that's what, that's how we make sure that our money is safe. So, yeah, we're at that point. Did I hit everything you had?
And more.
Okay, good enough. All right.
Good now, you guys? Everybody else set with me?
Senator, I have one question.
Okay, so Alexander Ladd.
Do you have a record of the number of students? Sometimes a parent or a student will come to you and say, I need to put down X number of dollars to reserve my seat, so I need that partial payment. And within statute, it basically says if you have monies available to put that out forward. Have you done any of this forward funding or to reserve a seat? For example, I had a call from my grandkid just yesterday saying, I want to take driver's ed, it's going to cost $603 for the course. They want it before it starts.
Yes. We don't have any money for that.
Okay,
There's no cash available to do any forward funding.
to reserve a seat.
No.
Okay, thank
The
you.
family would have to do that on their own.
Representative Hicks, do you have any questions? Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Senator. I think that my only comment is to get more report in November to make sure we get some clarification on both this parent commission
Yes.
and also what programs that may be in violation of the statute and what happens with those programs. But that's for future.
And we can start thinking about what the report is going to be like in November.
Good then.
I think you're off the seat. Thank you very much. Caitlin Davis, do you have anything that you want to add and bring to our attention?
I haven't heard anything to discuss.
You okay?
Yeah. I'm good,
Good.
unless you have questions for me.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me that we have quite a few things for our next meeting. Don't you say that, Kate?
It's easy, that's not hard at all.
Things that you're gonna look into, and we'll find out
Stuff
more.
that's already there, and just bring it to you. Yeah, no problem.
Set a next meeting date. August.
You should go to September, that way the stuff that's done in August is actually ready to bring to you.
I don't have my calendar. But by August, we should, have some of the things from today and some of the answers. So we can complete, a report.
Madam Chair, I expect that the final proposal for these rules will be before Joe.
Could you come up this week and hear you?
This, Attorney Morrell from Jellicon.
Okay.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Michael Laurel. I'm the Director of the Administrative Rules Unit within the Office of Legislative Services. Right now, there is an initial proposal that has been filed a few months ago. I know on July 1st, my office, the attorneys in my office are meeting with several representatives from the Department of Education. Because that is not until the beginning of July, I expect the final proposal won't be filed at least until later in July. If it is in July and it's 3 weeks before the August jail car meeting, then, which will be the third Thursday of the month, then the final proposal will go to jail car at that August meeting. If it doesn't get filed in July, then it will be the September meeting.
So are you suggesting we will have a next meeting after the August Johnson meeting?
I guess that's up to you, whether you want to have a meeting before the rule goes to jail car or after.
Okay. That's good to know.
Okay?
So, certainly the rule for the jail part, they have meetings on the, DOE, rules. So, we were just talking about when would be a good time to meet, so it sounds to me it's either after the third Thursday in August maybe, so we can start thinking about what we have with the report in November.
I have a question on that. Maybe the Attorney Morrell can help you out on the process, the timeline, timeframe here. When will the state board be looking at these the draft proposal and having hearings?
They've had their initial proposal, they've had their public hearings. Right now, they are working on the text of the final proposal based on the comments they've received from the public, and others.
Okay, that answers my, thank you very much.
So, say August, after that's one week in August. Because Johnson is the third Thursday in August.
John Carter.
Meets on Thursdays during the summer, not before, only on Fridays because we have session on Thursdays.
So they're 15.
That's probably, if that's the third Thursday, it'll be the 15th. So sometime after that, then we can see what the new rules are and what they have covered and, pull things together that we have learned. You wanna set a tentative date,
22nd.
22nd of August? I know that suits you.
Yeah, that's fine, either the 22nd or the 29th,
This tentative, it is just.
both Thursdays.
Say, yeah. Okay. Representative Hicks, how does that look to you?
I'm looking right now.
Okay. You know, it's just not set in stone, but at least we have something that we can aim towards.
Representative Hicks, when are you starting up school?
The 29th.
The 29th?
The
Yeah,
22nd.
that's not a good date then. The 29th, the 22nd sounds better.
22nd would be better.
So except for the fact that we have a lot of questions, this Baker
remember one with the OEM rules back in July 15th, a couple of years back.
It wasn't so much our, it's David's.
Oh, thank you very much. Are you coming tomorrow? 10 o'clock, that is the
Right.
306.
Right. That-
Yeah, and Frank will be presenting that, so. Thank you very much.
Actually, that's amazing. Such a crazy